Hello, MCTV viewers. My name is Willem Jewett, and today I'm filling in for Betty Nuovo. This is part of MCTV's mission to provide access to all the political candidates. And today I'm joined by two guests. I have Chris Bray first with me. Chris is a member of the Senate right now. And I'm also joined by Shap Smith. Shap is running for currently the Speaker of the House and running for Lieutenant Governor. Welcome.
Great to be here. Thanks.
Nice to see you again.
Just to start off the conversation, I figure I'll share a disclaimer many viewers will know, but I've served with you, Shap, for 14 years in the House. And in fact, you were reminding me that we met on the campaign trail when we were first running back in 2002. And Chris, you and I have served in the House, and now we're cross colleagues across the across the bodies.
You were the guy actually who asked me, have you ever thought about running for the House?
Yeah.
That got me started.
So I've had to practice on my hardball questions. I have some screws to put under your fingernails.
Oh, good. It'll just be like a continuation of serving with you in the House.
Right. So Shap, you're running for Lieutenant Governor, and first up is a primary.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then the general election.
Right. Yeah.
The primary is nominally scheduled for August 9th, but
people are voting now.
That's why I wanted to get that pitch out with the early voting. Any day you can drop by your town clerk's office and pick up a ballot and vote for your candidate.
That's right. Yep. Yeah.
I've already voted myself.
I know. And I'm going to vote soon. My wife has also voted. I personally like the tradition of going in on the day that the polls are open, but a lot of people prefer to do the early voting.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I'm going to be away that day anyway. So.
Yeah.
Hey, so tell me one of the things that I really enjoy when I see people, and I know a lot of them now, is to hear some tales from the campaign trail.
Yeah.
I know you and all the other candidates have been crisscrossing the state and putting a lot of miles on your cars, and I'd just be interested in some of those experiences.
Yeah. So I mean, it's actually an incredible experience to campaign in this state, particularly for someone like me who grew up in Wolcott and Elmore. So I grew up in Elmore, Wolcott, Lamoille County area. My family moved up here when I was 5. They were part of the Back to the Land movement. We started a farm, and it's just and the reason I say it's interesting as somebody who grew up here is that I run into people all over the state who I haven't seen 20, 30, 40 years. We were down in Bennington on Monday, and we're having lunch at the Crazy Russian Bakery, and all of a sudden somebody walks in and she's like, "Shap, what are you doing?" And it's somebody who I hadn't seen since I was in college, or somebody who I was close friends with when I was in college. So the trail has been good because you just run into people who you know. The other thing is that it's a way to really understand what's happening to people out there and what people are concerned about. And you get a sense of what the different issues are in different parts of the state. And then you get a sense of there are some really common issues. That housing is a problem everywhere. People are having real struggle trying to find housing that's affordable. And it's not just people who would qualify for affordable housing. It's people who have, their first job or, their second or third job. They really struggling. So I wish everybody could do it. You see all the cool stuff that's happening around the state, and you also find out that there are real challenges.
You've run for the House and done the door knocking, and you can't knock on doors across the whole state, but I got to imagine it's the same sort of experience. You're in a lot of downtowns and meeting with a lot of people. Today, I think Chris was showing you around Middlebury. Is that right?
Yeah. Sure. We're out and about, and it's just it wasn't scientific, but if you go from the bookstore to the realtor to the stationers, you get a different slice of how business is, how life is, what the kind of rhythms there are in terms of people feeling optimistic, where they want to see things improve.
Yep.
And for me, it's also nice to see how positively and respectfully Vermonters respond to candidates. I mean, everyone, Shap's getting a great response as we walk around.
Yeah. Well, I'll just say this: one of the things that sort of surprised me is, and some people know this, but I was in the governor's race last fall, and my wife got really sick with cancer. And what has been surprising, but also affirming about this state, is how many people, wherever I go, ask me how my wife is. And once again, I was in Bennington, walking around with Senator Brian Campion, and walking around the Bennington College campus, and this woman asked me how she was doing, and then she's like, "I just want to give you a hug," And I mean, it's a reminder that politics here is a much better experience, I think, than it is in the rest of the country.
Yeah.
And she's doing well, right?
She is great. She is running more than I am, truly running, not running, campaigning. And she's seeing patients full time, so she's doing really well. Thanks for asking. Yeah.
Right.
So what did you hear walking around Middlebury today?
Actually, we went into the bookstore. The person that was working there was saying that they felt like things are stabilized for the bookstore market, that people are really understanding that bookstores are a place where communities can gather, and that once again people are starting to recognize the importance of them. We went to the stationery store. It's one of the few stationery stores I think that's still left in the state. They seem to be doing well. And then on the real estate market, there was a lot of property for sale on the lake. If you asked if I had $800,000 or $900,000 to buy a place on the lake, which I had to say I did not have.
Well, I'm glad you came here instead of going to look at property.
Yeah. So I'm curious, since you do have this great sample of having been traveling around the state the last couple of months, beyond housing, what kind of things are coming to the forefront as concerns that you hear over and over again?
Yeah. So I think that a lot of communities throughout the state are still really concerned about opiates. The issue of opiates resonates, I think, in almost every community throughout the state. People really are struggling with that sort of the addiction and the challenges that come along with that. The real challenges to families of parents who are addicted or kids that are addicted. The question of economic security that often leads to insecurity that often leads to addiction, and just what can we do to help people get out of the addiction. And so that's a common theme and common concern that I hear throughout the state.
Sure.
Yeah.
There was a VPR poll out today, and one of the questions was on opiates, and the number of people who either had immediate contact with someone who had an opiate addiction problem, I thought was stunningly high.
Yeah.
It is stunningly high, and the problem is worse in a much more fundamental way than it was 20, 25 years ago. I mean, I unfortunately lost a friend to overdose in the early 90s. So it has been something that has existed in Vermont, but not to the extent that it does now. And I attribute a lot of that to the prescription drug industry that came out with OxyContin 15, 20 years ago, and really I think got in the market and got a lot of people addicted.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely two legs to that. And I've said for a while, we got to get control of the ones we're supposed to be regulating, because we don't really have control over them. Even now, I think we did some work in this past session, but
well, the Commissioner of Health is working with the medical community now to put in place best practices for prescriptions.
Yeah.
So Harry Chen, who you and I served with, and who is an emergency room doctor, is working with the medical community to make sure that people are not overprescribing. And the medical community, to their credit, has taken this very seriously and has been working to create better standards.
I heard this interesting reason for why we've gotten into this, which was, I think it was a doctor who told me that, we've always had 4 vital functions, and that somewhere along the line, 15 years ago, a 5th vital function was added, which was your pain level. And so when you go into the doctor's office and you have this 0 to 10 pain, and they're always asking you, the concept of of treating pain just became more, just much more of a practice, and whether that was pushed by the drug companies or not, I'm not clear, but that's what the explanation was given to me.
Yeah, no, and I think
and it
that's
made some sense.
Yeah, I think it's real. I think that there was a concern that pain was undertreated, that was expressed in the early 90s, and the desire to do a better job treating that pain was something that was incorporated into medical school curriculum and overall practices in the late 90s, and that there were tools that would allow people to address those concerns, the new pharmaceuticals. I think what happened was that the focus became too great on that particular issue. You know, I speak to that issue as somebody who's married to a family practice doctor, and somebody who now does a lot of addiction treatment, and the challenges around that are pretty substantial.
Yep.
You know, one thing that the two of you can appreciate and speak to in a way that I can't, given your law practice, is how addictions are having impacts on the legal system in the state of Vermont. Is there any?
I mean, I got to tell you, I'm not the one being interviewed here, but it's amazing. I sat with the Chief Justice of our Supreme Court, and to see this guy who's spent a whole career, he's a mature jurist, and to see his emotion, I mean, over the kids especially, who come into the trial courts and the way in which they come in, it was difficult for me to watch, because as a lawyer I think of justices and judges as being sort of rational and unemotional and dispassionate, and I mean he's very torn up, you know, and I don't think he's we heard the same thing when I've done a bunch of judicial retention, and we've heard the same thing from the trial court bench.
Yeah.
And
I mean,
don't know if that's
so this issue is tearing at the fabric of society in almost every place. You hear about it in the schools, and the challenges that teachers are facing with children that are in families that are suffering from the addiction scourge. You hear about it in the courts with the temporary placement and the hearings that are done with regard to, you know, pulling kids out of families. You hear about it in the designated agencies and substance abuse. So this is something that it goes to the core of a functioning society, and we really need to get a handle on it. And you know, a lot of people criticize Governor Shumlin for a lot of things, but I'll tell you what, the fact that he was willing to stand up and say, this is a problem, and this is a problem that we have to face, and we have to say it out loud, and this is a problem that we're going to work to fix, when other states were burying their heads in the sand, I think is a testament to the fact that he understood what Vermont needed, and the fact that we needed to look in the mirror.
Hey, let's if we could bounce off the issues for a second here. You know, you're running for Lieutenant Governor.
Yep.
And it seems like every 2 years we ask ourselves as a state, like, what the heck is that job? What is that position? No, seriously.
Right.
And then when we get a little past that, we say, well, you know, what does Lieutenant Governor actually do, and what can the Lieutenant Governor do? And candidates have their different answers to it. So I don't know. Let's explore that a little bit.
So, you know, the Lieutenant Governor has, I think, some, you know, core functions, and then, you know, you are what you want to, that job is what you want to make it. So let's talk about just sort of what you're tasked with doing.
Your constitutional duties.
Your constitutional duties. You preside over the Senate. You're the president of the Senate. You have the responsibility of being part of a 3-person committee on committees to work to assign chairs and committee members, and you know, make decisions about the rules questions on the Senate floor. And as one of my opponents recently said, you wake up every morning and check up on the health of the governor, and make sure that nothing has happened to the governor, because ultimately your role is somebody to be there to step in if necessary,
or his travel schedule, or her travel schedule.
So those are sort of the specific functions that are constitutional duties. You know, what I would like to model if I become Lieutenant Governor, my job after is someone like Howard Dean, who would look at a particular issue, would focus on a particular issue, and would use the position of Lieutenant Governor to shine a light on it and to try to build consensus in moving things forward. He worked on child health care. He worked on a number of different issues, but those opportunities of highlighting issues and pushing them forward are the things that I'm really looking forward to doing as Lieutenant Governor. So it's issues like childhood poverty and early childhood education, issues like downtown redevelopment, which I think are key to our economic vitality and jobs in the future. And then we still have work to do on healthcare. We need to make sure that everybody really does have access to it and can afford to have access to it. So,
well, and the other thing I've seen is lieutenant governors you develop a close working relationship with senators, and so although you may not be leading the way you led the House, there's still the very real potential to have those positive collaborative relationships that help you move an agenda or bring issues up or lead on a discussion.
Sometimes I've been jealous of you guys in the Senate to have to only interact with sort of 29 or 30 other people.
That's true.
We have 150 over in the House side.
I think, I don't think it can be overstated, sort of the soft power influence that the person who heads the chamber can have. You set a tone in how the chamber is going to operate. And then in your relationships, you really set a tone on how people are going to work together outside of the chamber. And I saw that in the lieutenant governors that have been elected while I've been speaker, in that they may not always be at the forefront, but they're always in the background. And there is clearly influence that is brought to bear by that office in the Senate in a way that people, I think, would be surprised by.
Right.
Is that fair to say?
I think so. The thing that we're always shortest of in the legislature is time. There's many more issues than you ever have time for. So when you have someone who organizes a group, who helps it cohere, work respectively, productively, you get more done.
Yep.
And I think that kind of leadership is something I very much appreciate.
I think the way you describe it as soft leadership, in my experience, having served in a number of capacities with you, there is, and what I'd tell people is there's so much that happens apart from being out on the floor of the House. What happens there is important, and it gets publicized and whatnot, but the work's done in committee, we always say, but it's also done between people, sometimes over coffees and over dinner, what have you. And I think that may be what you're talking about, the soft influence.
Yeah,
Sure.
I mean, so as Speaker of the House, one of the things that I really tried to have as my motto was, you can get a lot of stuff done if you don't care who gets credit for.
Yeah.
And, so it really is trying to figure out who's the best person to do the work that will advance the issue, and who's the best person to move issues forward for the state of Vermont. And I think you can do that as President of the Senate and as Lieutenant Governor.
Sure.
And
Sure.
that's what I hope to bring. I have very strong relationships both in the House and the Senate that have been developed over the last 14 years. And I think that was demonstrated by the fact that many senators have endorsed my candidacy.
Right. Well, and I just, a real life story that comes immediately to mind was we just had a very difficult tightrope to cross. That was passing a new bill in a single day when there was a veto session that came up. And the House and Senate worked well to get that done in a single day. And I give you really high marks. And the Senate passed things by lunchtime, and you had a lot of work to do to get that done. And you were able to pull people together and get that done.
Yes.
Well, you're being modest. You had a lot. You
You
had a
did.
good hand
Yeah,
in
right.
that too, Senator Bray. Hey, I know viewers would not be happy if I didn't talk to you a little bit about the rail project here, and I'm sure if you walk downtown, it's not a surprise question to you. Dick Thodall here was telling me that the select board met last night, and you know, there's very concerned, let's say, about the impacts that's going to have on the downtown and the economic viability of the businesses downtown. So we should talk a little bit about the rail project. I think I was in my law office, which is just across the street from the rail. So I was in there when the rail cars derailed with the gasoline in them. Thought that was a loud noise, so I ran out the door and over to the bank and saw the things on their side and some little fires burning, and wasn't sure what was inside there, but thought that was a good idea to go home at this point in time.
It's unusual for you. You usually run to the fire, right? Yeah.
Well, I did, but
Then you ran away.
thought maybe going home was a good idea.
Yeah.
You know, work needs to be done on the rail for sure, but these prospect of 3 years of construction are really of great concern.
Yeah. I mean, so this is always the challenge that we have with big infrastructure projects. We have had this happen to us a couple times in Morrisville, where we had a bridge out in the middle of town that basically gutted our downtown. I mean, nobody could get in and out of a bunch of the streets. So what I think is incumbent on the Agency of Transportation is to figure out how to do it as quickly as possible with as little disruption as possible. And the responsiveness to the community is critical. So if it's sort of putting up signs, helping to encourage people to come downtown, or do whatever is necessary to help that out, to my way of thinking, that's the state's responsibility. The flip side of it is, we have to do a bunch of these infrastructure projects. I mean, we just have to. And the failure to do has even longer term consequences for the economies of a lot of these communities.
I think people understand that it has to get done. I think it's just the length.
The 3 year length.
Yeah, I think that in its original thought, it was thought to be a year project, and then for whatever reasons, and there are people who point fingers all over the place, it's ballooned to something that's now felt to be unacceptable.
Yeah, I'd have to go back and take a look at what the timeline had been, but I do think it's incumbent on the state agency to recognize that you've got to do these projects as quickly as possible.
So I'll give you fair warning that if you're elected, the select board and representatives, including Senator Bray here, probably might marching into your office and asking for your help with
Good.
V-Trans.
That'll be fine.
Well, I think about what happened in Barrie. They tore up all of downtown, and I think they did a lot of work to help merchants overcome the challenges of.
And there hasn't been much talk about that yet. That's an interesting point.
And yet, when you go downtown Barrie now, it looks beautiful. The merchants are really happy. So it was just a painful phase that had to be worked through. And I think when V-Trans engages the community respectfully and partners with them, really, then I think
we can move that.
We've seen them do it before.
Well, we've seen this with the rapid bridge construction, where we're not putting temporary bridges in. Every community seems to get quite anxious for a while. They'll be cut off.
Yeah.
It's going on in my hometown right now, New Haven. There's a bridge out, but they're making amazingly quick progress for being able to shut down the road.
Hey, we just have a few more minutes here. I don't know, are there other issues that you want to talk about? I mean, economic vitality and economics. You mentioned in your intro that you grew up in a rural part of the state, and representing a bunch of rural towns myself, I feel like that's really critical that we keep a focus on our rural communities and making them so that people can still live in them.
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge challenge for us, and as somebody who grew up in Lemoyne County and still lives there, and as somebody who has often heard the refrain, people seem to pay attention to Chittenden County and nowhere else, I am really responsive to that concern. we definitely need to continue to have a vital rural economy. As somebody who grew up on a farm, who was actually selling produce at farmers markets in the 1970s as a way to make enough money to buy comic books and ice cream cones, I understand the need for that vitality. But and I think one of the ways that we're going to sustain the rural areas of the state is also to have vibrant regional downtowns throughout the state. And I think that what will happen is growth will radiate out from those downtowns. And that, to me, is critical to our long-term success in the state.
So if Middlebury has good job opportunities and Exchange Street is
Vibrant.
hopping and vibrant,
Right.
then your point is that, look, the people who live in the communities that work in town
Yep.
will also be
Yeah.
vibrant.
I mean, if you have Virgins and you have Middlebury and you have Brandon, this Route 7 corridor with vital downtowns, and you see those vital downtowns happening in each one of those communities, I think the rest of the area ends up being vibrant. It doesn't mean you do work to the exclusion of the other communities. You understand that to make sure that they're healthy, all of those communities need to be healthy.
Right.
Hey, one final question, maybe cost of higher education.
Yep.
It's been discussed nationally. We've had a focus on it here in the state. It seems like it's been primarily around CCV. Is there potential to really get our arms around the cost at UVM as well, though?
Well, I think it's going to be a huge challenge, and there is going to have to be a pretty big infusion of cash if we're going to make a big dent in it. We put a little bit more money into state colleges this year, but it was still only a 2% increase. What I want to make sure is that if we decide to put a big infusion of cash into higher education to help students, that just doesn't get swallowed up by the universities in building sprees or amenities that are good to have but aren't necessary to have. And I think that's our challenge in making sure that if we put money into higher education, it's actually helping the students of Vermont.
Now, Chris, do you served on that, or do you?
Yeah, so I've been a
currently
UVM trustee. I'm stepped off the board, but I was a UVM trustee for 6 years, and one of the first big surprises to me was the percentage of Vermonters who go to UVM tuition free.
Mm-hmm.
It's roughly 45% pay no tuition at UVM, and the number of receiving aid, not loans, but aid is roughly 80%. So there is actually quite a bit of support, but still, on top of tuition alone, you have rooms, meals, you have books. There's a lot of other costs that go along with being in school full time. And we have that low rate of kids moving from high school into college. And I think that's something we're all interested in seeing us build a wider bridge that gets more kids to more higher education, however many additional years they need. Maybe it's 1, maybe it's 2, maybe it's 4, but the job market wants more education.
And I think one of the good things that we've done in the legislature is we've given high school kids opportunities to earn college credit while they're in high school,
Right.
and making sure that UVM and the Vermont State Colleges recognize that, which they do, will make a difference in making college less expensive.
So I see we're getting to wrap up. I want to thank you both for joining me here today, and I think it's been a good conversation.
Great.
I really appreciate you coming down
Thanks.
to Addison County
Yeah.
and Middlebury and walking around the downtown. Chris, thanks for showing Shap around.
Well,
Well, thanks for your service, Willem.
Good luck.
Yeah,
Good
thanks.
luck in the election, and
thank you.
good to see you again.
Good to see
Thanks.
you.
So are we supposed to continue to chat?